Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of Convicts and Cops. Thank you for joining us once again as we touch upon a unique Mexican Mafia story. Today, we will be discussing the criminal journey of the only Japanese American member of the Mexican Mafia. His birth name was Michael Kudo, but he was known on the streets of LA and in the prison system as Jap Mike. We will take you to his origins in Hawaii, early criminal history in the city of Honolulu, his migration to California, his commitment offense, his recruitment into the Mariposa, his padrino, release on parole, and eventual demise. But before we go there, here's a quick word from our sponsor. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of the judgment." Michael Ichiro Kudo was born on July 9, 1940, in Honolulu, Hawaii, to parents Isami Kudo and Violet Kiroshita. Kudo attended McKinley High School in Honolulu. The picture you are viewing is from the 1956 yearbook and his sophomore year. The next picture appears to be his senior yearbook picture from 1958. These innocent times would not last long, and shortly thereafter, Kudo's wild and rebellious side would lead to his first encounters with law enforcement and the courts. On February 14, 1960, at 3:30 a.m., Pearl City police officers formed a perimeter around 36 youths enjoying illegal drag racing on Naroki Road on Navy property. Previous attempts at apprehending the youths had failed due to the use of lookouts posted 3/4 of a mile from the actual drag racing, but police blocked off previously used escape routes through the nearby cane fields. Youths ranging in age from 16 to 21 years were charged with trespassing and released on $25 bail. 19-year-old Michael Kudo was one of the youths taken down in the dragnet. Kudo's affinity for motorsports is no surprise when we look at his father's past. In February 1926, Isami Kudo was admitted into the Oahu Motorcycle Club and took part in the sectional hill climbing contest at Woodlawn Hill at East Manoa on February 21st. Mike Kudo's next run-in with the law took place on June 23, 1960, when police received a tip at 1:15 a.m. that the Country Square store was being burglarized. Lieutenant Thomas W. Soper, a sergeant, and 4 police officers arrived and found Kudo and a 16-year-old juvenile breaking into a pinball machine, while Robert Nishihama sat in the car as a lookout. Police found the front door and 2 other pinball machines broken open. Kudo and Nishihama were booked on charges of first-degree burglary. The juvenile was charged with juvenile delinquency. Kudo and Nishihama were indicted by the Oahu grand jury on August 18, 1960. Kudo's criminality continued to escalate. He was arrested on July 5, 1963 for rape. I know some of you are going to get excited and cry out, "sex jacket." Sorry guys, these types of crimes were not uncommon back in the day and were rarely frowned upon inside the prison system. The Oahu grand jury indicted Kudo on July 11, 1963 for the rape of a 26-year-old Honolulu waitress on July 2, 1963 in Kahala Beach Park. Kudo was arraigned on July 19, 1963. He entered a not guilty plea and was released on $4,500 bail. On January 8, 1964, Circuit Judge William Z. Fairbanks forfeited the bond and issued a warrant for his arrest when he failed to appear for trial. Kudo's lawyer told the court he was unable to reach his client, and it was believed he fled from the jurisdiction of the court. It is quite possible that his father's ailing health and hospitalization due to a heart condition spurred his decision to jump bail for Gardena, California, where his father passed away on January 10, 1964. On June 20th, 1964, a party was held at the Gardena home of Kudo's sister. Frank Suzuki was in attendance with his fiancée. An argument ensued when Suzuki became concerned that Kudo began to show too much attention to his fiancée. When the couple walked out of the party, a fight ensued when Kudo and Stanley Hirai attacked Suzuki. Suzuki was stabbed in the neck and died from his wounds. Police officers found a knife at the scene of the crime. Kudo and Hirai were arrested on June 22, 1964. A preliminary hearing was held and arraignment set for July 13th. After Kudo was booked and processed, his fingerprints were sent to the FBI's Identification Division in Washington, and it was discovered that Kudo was wanted in Honolulu for rape. I am unsure and cannot tell you if this crime was ever adjudicated. On September 22, 1967, Judge Masato Doi denied a motion by Kudo requesting that the charge of rape be dismissed because he had been denied a speedy trial. The judge answered the request by stating bluntly, and I quote, "Although he claims a violation of his Sixth Amendment rights to a speedy trial, he is not a seeker of, but a fugitive from justice." The judge also added, "A defendant must be within the jurisdiction and available for trial, not a fugitive yelling from beyond the process of this court." Beyond these documented proceedings, there was no additional information on this matter, and it can only be assumed that the more serious charge in California would somehow take precedence and become the controlling offense to be handled by the court system. Either that or maybe the lady, the rape victim, did not want to testify at this point. That happens a lot. Mike Kudo's murder charges for the stabbing death of Suzuki would result in a manslaughter conviction. This good fortune would result in a mandatory 6 months to 15-year prison sentence in 1964, and he was processed at the California Institution for Men's Reception and Guidance Center in Chino. Jap Mike was received at San Quentin on November 17, 1964. This is where he made the acquaintance of members of the Mexican Mafia. Two of them were Danny Chapa, a.k.a. Chapo from Hawaiian Gardens, who was also referred to as Chapo, and Howard Pacini, also known as Cappy. Cappy was also from Hawaiian Gardens. Chapa and Cappy became good friends with Jap Mike, who was now also referred to as Japones. They made Jap Mike an honorary member of their Hawaiian Gardens street gang. Back in the day, this was a common practice amongst inmates who had no street gang affiliation and would become close acquaintances of imprisoned gang members. Rudy Cheyenne Cadena from Bakersfield, for example, became an honorary street gang member of the Primera Flats gang due to his relationship with Grumpy Garcia, Kiki Mays, Big Mike Mulhern, and other Mexican Mafia members who hailed from Primera Flats. The same took place with Frankie Buelna, a.k.a. Chivo from Merced. He would become Chivo from Primera Flats. Of course, later in life, Chivo would change his moniker to Frankie B. Another Mexican Mafia member to be embraced in a similar fashion was Chaparro from Santa Paula. He was made an honorary member of Fort Maravilla by Vago Estrada. I believe this took place in Folsom before he was recruited into the Mexican Mafia. There were others, but these quickly come to mind. What an interesting quirk of irony that a Japanese American from Hawaii, whose circle of street associates were predominantly Japanese at one point, would become connected with a Mexican gang member from Hawaiian Gardens, also known as Chapo. And he was sponsored into a predominantly Mexican-American prison gang. Jap Mike's padrino, Chapo from Hawaiian Gardens, has an interesting story. From the photo you are viewing during the time of his commitment offense, at first glance he doesn't appear that he could bust a grape. When you're young and dumb, many dangerous dudes don't look menacing or dangerous at all. But his crime may dictate a different story. On Saturday, April 14, 1962, a rumble took place between two longtime feuding gangs, the Hawaiian Gardens Demonios clique, locked Cuernos against the Artesia Espantos clique. Cuernos is Spanish for horns, locking horns. Apparently, Daniel Chapa, aka Chapo, who belonged to the Demonios, was not happy with the outcome and decided to go hunting on his own for some revenge in the Artesia Espantos territory. At a pre-trial hearing, two Artesia Espanto gang members, Junio Boros and Richard Arror, testified and provided the details of the attack. According to their first-hand account, they described the attack as unhurried. There was no running by either Chapo or his victims. They estimated that at least 10 minutes had elapsed between the first shot fired and the last. Chapo reportedly pulled up to a residence on 18817 Albertus Avenue in Artesia and exited his vehicle and began his attack. Robert Sanchez, age 19, was the first to be shot. Sanchez suffered gunshots to the chest, abdomen, and right thigh, and would bleed out from a bullet wound to the heart. The next to be shot was Refugio Rivera Jr., age 17. He was shot in the right hand and back. Chapo was reported to then have walked towards a restaurant a block away near the South Street intersection and just stood around scanning the area looking for more enemies. The two Espantos witnesses testified that when Chapo began his assault on Robert Sanchez, they exited a vehicle they were sitting in on Albertus Avenue and ran up a driveway to escape the gunfire. When they returned 10 minutes later, they heard Sanchez yelling for help and observed Thomas Rodriguez, age 16, walking towards the slowly retreating Chapo. Borro said he saw Chapo turn around and shoot once and hit Rodriguez in the hip. Chapo then walked on to South Street and turned toward Pioneer Boulevard. Boros and Arror then went to a nearby field where they had a hidden rifle. They proceeded to jump into a vehicle being driven by another Espantos gang member and went looking for Chapo. Near South Street and Pioneer, they found Chapo walking slowly northward. They made a U-turn, fired once, and sped off. Chapo was later taken to Artesia Hospital by his parents for treatment of a bullet wound in the lower back. He was arrested at the hospital by police for the murder and assault with intent to commit murder as a result of the non-shooting victims. On June 15, 1962, Chapo entered a not guilty plea by reason of insanity to the charges of murder and assault with the intent to commit murder. Judge Maurice C. Sparling appointed Dr. George Abe to examine Chapo. A trial date was set for July 23, 1962, and he was to be held in jail without bail until then. Having been found sane, Chapo agreed to plead guilty to one count of second-degree murder. His request for probation was denied, and he was sentenced to 5 years to life in the California Department of Corrections. It was at San Quentin where Chapo was recruited into the Mexican Mafia. Unlike many of the other California state-raised guys, Jap Mike had less early street and prison information to share, but I did discover this photograph I thought was too good to not share with you. Some of the circulated stories about Jap Mike is that he introduced the Eastern warrior philosophy to the fellas, such as the 7 principles the samurai lived by. They were known as Bushido and the writings of Miyamoto Musashi. I met Jap Mike sometime in early 1971 inside the San Quentin B-Section segregation unit. I was doing time in isolation for fighting and being drunk and disorderly on the main line. I had already been recruited into the Mexican Mafia and was very aware of the M guys in the adjustment center and B section who were on long-term segregation status. Sergeant Hankins would not allow Chapo, Jap Mike, and dozens of other M members to walk the yarda at San Quentin due to his collaboration with inmates who advised him not to release these guys. As a newbie in La M, I had the privilege of meeting many of the OG members, and Chapa introduced me to Jap Mike, who called out from his cell, "Órale carnal, mucho gusto." The dude sounded like a damn Chicano, which tripped me out. Have you ever seen or heard an Asian talk in Spanish or with a Spanish accent? Now I've seen it all, is what I recall thinking. I'm telling you, gang membership is definitely how you identify. As you can see from the picture, Jap Mike Kudo was a practitioner of martial arts, and I heard after he paroled from prison in the early 70s, about a year after I met him in B section, he opened and operated a martial arts studio back in Honolulu, Hawaii. The photograph you are viewing was taken at Chino Prison's South CC facility sometime in late 1971 with fellow mafiosos Güero Buff Flores and Dopey Montez, and an associate just before they were released. After serving 7 years on the manslaughter conviction, Kudo paroled back to Hawaii in 1972. Güero Buff was also preparing to parole. Once he did, he hooked up with fellow homeboy Alex Hondo Lechuga, who had escaped from Soledad on May 30th, 1969, and fled to Juarez, Mexico. They set up the first Mexican Mafia heroin pipeline from Mexico to Los Angeles. The other Mexican Mafia member pictured in the far right is Raul Dopey Montez from 38th Street, who was also preparing to parole. South CC was a low-level prison back in the day, and everyone housed in this unit was preparing to go to Broadway. The identity of the other individual is unknown to me. On June the 8th, 1973, the Honolulu Advertiser reported the Oahu grand jury indicted Mike Kudo, now 32 years old, for the alleged possession on May 3rd, 1973, of a shotgun and ammunition by a person convicted of a felony. On July 27th, 1973, Circuit Judge Alan R. Hawkins signed extradition papers for Kudo, ordering his return to California for violating his parole. The newspaper reported that he was managing a billiard parlor at the time. After a short stint behind the walls for the parole violation, Kudo returned to Honolulu once again. Over time, Jap Mike was joined by various Mexican Mafia members, including Roland Rolo Berry from Watts, Paul Güero Tres Portillo from Big Hazard, Antonio Tony Palacios from Garrity, and others. With Jap Mike's familiarity with the island, coupled with the drug contacts the fellows enjoyed in Mexico, they became involved in running heroin and crystal meth. It was also reported they engaged in an extortion scheme against union workers who worked on the set of the popular show known as Baywatch. Fast forwarding to the 1990s, many of you are familiar with the movie American Me, which featured Edward James Olmos playing the true-life Cheyenne Cadena, William Forsythe playing the role of Joe Morgan, and Pepe Serna playing the role of Mundo, me. Many other true-life characters were also portrayed, including Chapo, who was very obviously Jap Mike. In the one scene where he says, "Open your eyes, vato," he proceeds to stab Pieface to death on the prison weight pile. Of course, this never happened. Pieface had already dropped out of the M, was in bad standing with the fellas, had become an informant, but in real life he died of natural causes inside a California state prison about a decade after American Me was released. Jap Mike's character is depicted as being so loyal to Santana that he refused to come out of his cell because he knew what was going to happen to Santana. Bullshit is what that was. Sorry, guys. So Jap Mike does have some cinematic creds, albeit fiction, to hang his hat on. At some point, Jap Mike left his beloved Honolulu and moved to Evergreen, Alabama, where he died on July 15, 1993, at the young age of 53. I am not sure of the circumstances of his death, but I am sure he regretted spending those years locked up when he realized his life would be cut short. There is no prize, no trophy waiting for you at the finish line, ladies and gentlemen. Our one certain appointment in life after we're born is our rendezvous with death. My prayer for you is that you maximize your journey and make your loved ones proud of who you are. May you allow the Lord Jesus to pull you out of that burning car and save you from utter destruction. Save your soul. Don't look back. Vaya por la sombra. Be careful. Good night, and God bless you.